She trusted him. She raised his child, and she never saw it coming. To their friends, they were a tight-knit family, smiling in photos, celebrating birthdays, raising children under the same roof. He was the provider. She was the nurturer. And the girl she called her daughter while she was growing up in a house full of love. Or so it seemed. But the surface only tells one story. Sometimes the truth lives in the silences between smiles, in the glances too long to be innocent, in the moments no one thought to question, until it was far too late. This story doesn't begin with blood. It begins with trust. A woman who believed in second chances, in family, in love. A man who played the role of protector but had a plan no one could have imagined. And a daughter caught in the middle, or maybe something more. Over the course of years, something changed. Subtle shifts in behavior, tension that no one could explain. A marriage that looked fine from the outside, but inside was growing colder by the day. She journaled. She prayed. She tried to hold her family together. But even she couldn't sense what was waiting for her. Until one day she was gone. No warning. No goodbye. Just an empty bed. And a husband with too many answers, and none at all. And when the truth came out, it wasn't just horrifying. It was unspeakable. Because the man she loved, the man she trusted with her heart, her home, and her children, was preparing to replace her. Was someone closer than anyone could fathom. This is the story of betrayal beyond comprehension. Of a woman whose only mistake was trusting the wrong person. And of a daughter who became the unexpected centerpiece in a plot that would shake an entire town. A true story. Every detail verified. Every word harder to believe than the last. Stay with us. This is heartbreaking true crime. Husband murders wife to marry stepdaughter. Subscribe to Crime Vault now, because the truth doesn't hide forever. And sometimes, the most terrifying stories are the ones that begin at home. Comment below. What's the most shocking family betrayal you've ever heard of? She was the kind of woman people admired from afar. A mother, a caregiver, a faithful wife. Friends called her the rock of the family, steady, loyal, always putting others first. Her name was Marissa Bennett. She worked as a nurse, loved gardening, and had a quiet habit of journaling late at night, writing down her prayers, her thoughts, her hopes for the future. She had one dream that never changed. A happy, stable home. And for a while, it looked like she had exactly that. Her husband, Daniel Bennett, was charming. Charismatic. The kind of man who could make a stranger feel like a lifelong friend in one conversation. He ran a small construction business well-liked in town, known for lending a hand, showing up to school fundraisers, always smiling. Together they raised 2 children. But one of them wasn't Daniel's by blood. Emily, Marissa's daughter from a previous relationship, was just a toddler when Daniel entered their lives. He raised her as his own. He taught her how to ride a bike. Cheered from the sidelines at soccer games. From the outside, it was a perfect story, a stepfather who stepped up without hesitation, a blended family that seemed to defy the odds. But time has a way of revealing things. Little by little, neighbors would later recall how Daniel grew distant, how he went from always being around to locking himself in the garage for hours. Emily, once bubbly and open, began keeping to herself more. Her smile remained, but some would say it no longer reached her eyes. Marissa kept her worries to herself. She was known for making excuses. Work's been hard on him. She's just going through teenage moods. It was easier than asking harder questions. At school events, Daniel always sat next to Emily. Marissa, often standing a step behind, recording everything on her phone, smiling politely. It meant nothing at the time. But later, those videos would be watched with a different lens. Marissa believed in their family. She believed in second chances, in redemption, in grace. What no one knew was that behind closed doors something dark was growing. Something no one was meant to see. Something that would only come to light when it was too late to save her. Marissa kept her worries behind closed lips. She didn't like to burden others. When something felt wrong, she prayed. When something hurt, she smiled through it. But those close to her, those who had known her longest, began to notice. Her laughter had softened. Her eyes stayed on the floor a little longer than they used to. She wasn't herself. One friend remembered her saying, "He just gets tired sometimes. I have to be patient with him." Another recalled overhearing raised voices from behind the bedroom door. Not once, but many times. Arguments that would end in silence, long stretches of it. Daniel had become unpredictable. Some days he was affectionate. Other days, Cold, dismissive, controlling. He started monitoring her spending, demanded to know who she was texting. He hated when she went out without him, unless it was to church. Even then, he'd often show up early, just to watch her. She started writing again. Not just her usual prayers, but questions, doubts, worries. In the pages of her journal, she documented conversations, subtle threats, moments that made her skin crawl. One entry read, "He looked at me like I was in his way." I asked him what was wrong and he said nothing. But the way he stared, it felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. But the most alarming changes were with Emily. She became quieter, more withdrawn. She started skipping social events, lost interest in school, and while Marissa tried to connect, something had shifted. She no longer spoke freely around her mother. But Daniel, they had become close, in a way that made some uneasy. When Marissa mentioned it to a family member, she brushed it off, saying, "She's a daddy's girl now. I guess I'm just the boring parent." She laughed after she said it, but no one else did. Daniel, meanwhile, had begun isolating them more and more. Family visits were postponed. Calls went unanswered. Marissa's sister remembered being told, "We're just working on ourselves right now. We'll catch up soon." But that call never came. Money started disappearing from their joint accounts. Marissa stopped buying little things for herself. She canceled a planned trip with friends, said it was too expensive. But Daniel had just bought a new pickup truck. Another journal entry dated just 3 months before her death read, "I feel like I'm vanishing, like I'm fading out of my own life. He talks to her more than me. He laughs with her. She follows him around like a shadow, and when I walk in the room, it's like I'm interrupting something." The signs were there, but they were quiet, and Marissa had been trained by love, by hope, by habit to ignore them. What she couldn't see, what none of them could, was that she was slowly being erased. Until the day she truly was. Have you ever seen red flags in a relationship others thought was perfect? It was a Tuesday. No holidays, no birthdays. Just an ordinary morning in an ordinary neighborhood. Birds outside, coffee brewing, cars leaving for work. The kind of day no one would remember, unless something unforgettable happened. And it did. Marissa got up early. She always did. She packed a lunch for Daniel. Left a note by the door like she had for the past 12 years. "Be safe today? I love you." Daniel left the house around 6:58. At least that's what he told everyone. Emily had school. She left a little after. Marissa stayed home. She had taken a rare day off from the hospital, a personal day. No one saw her alive again. By early afternoon, texts to Marissa went unanswered. A friend called straight to voicemail. Another text. Then another. No response. By evening, her sister grew worried. Marissa never ignored family. Not without saying something. At 8:12 p.m., police were asked to do a welfare check. Daniel was already home when they arrived. He answered the door in sweatpants, calm, tired-looking. He told them she had gone out earlier and must have just stayed out. Said they'd had a small argument. Nothing serious. But something about him felt off. An officer asked to look around. Daniel hesitated but let them in. The house was too quiet. No music. No television. Marissa's purse was on the counter. Her keys. Her phone. All there. But no Marissa. They searched every room. Then they checked the garage. That's where they found her. Wrapped in an old tarp. Shoved behind storage boxes. A faint smear of blood across the concrete floor. And on her wrist, her wedding ring still in place. She had been struck more than once. Blunt force trauma to the head. A hammer was found in the trash, wiped clean but not clean enough. The coroner would later confirm she died between 9 and 10, while Daniel claimed to be at work, but security footage from the construction site showed something else. He never showed up that day. Not once. And cell tower records proved it. His phone never left the neighborhood. What began as a welfare check became a murder scene. Police say Daniel never cried, never asked what happened, never begged to see her. He sat in the living room while they documented the scene. Quiet blank. And Emily? She came home in the middle of it all. She asked where her mother was. When an officer told her they had found a body in the garage, she didn't scream. She didn't collapse. She didn't say anything at all. It wasn't just murder. It was the ultimate betrayal. A wife killed by the man she loved for her own child. From the moment they discovered Marissa's body, detectives knew this was no robbery, no accident. This was personal. Too personal. The crime scene told a story. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables missing, but the strike marks, they weren't rushed. They were deliberate, rage-fueled. Police started with the obvious question. Where was Daniel that morning? He claimed he had gone to work as usual, but his coworkers hadn't seen him. His name hadn't been signed in at the site, and the surveillance camera at the construction entrance showed nothing. Then came the phone data. Cell tower records placed Daniel at the house until nearly noon. Text messages he sent claiming to be on site were time-stamped but didn't match his location. His alibi had crumbled. But what disturbed detectives more was what they began to see in Emily. At first, she was quiet, numb. Understandable. Her mother had just been killed. But the way she spoke about Daniel, it wasn't grief. It wasn't confusion. It was protective. She called him Dad, defended his innocence, said he'd never hurt anyone. But then came the inconsistencies. She told officers she hadn't seen Daniel that morning. Later, she said she thought he came back home to get something, and she wasn't sure. When asked if she'd noticed anything unusual lately, her face went blank. No, nothing really. But her phone told another story. Messages, some deleted, some recovered. Late-night conversations between her and Daniel. Cryptic exchanges. Strange emojis. Messages like, "Don't worry, it'll be over soon. We just have to be careful." And one that simply said, "It's time." Investigators obtained her search history. Over the prior 6 months, Emily had searched, "Can you marry your stepdad?" "How to erase text permanently?" "Age of consent in my state." Then there was the life insurance policy, signed just 8 weeks before the murder. Daniel listed as the primary beneficiary. The stepdaughter, a secondary. Marissa never mentioned it to anyone. Detectives pressed harder. They searched Daniel's devices. In one hidden folder buried in his cloud storage, they found what they had feared. Photos of Emily, private, inappropriate, time-stamped, some as early as when she was just 15. It was no longer just a murder case. It was something much darker, much more twisted. But the smoking gun came from the forensic lab. The hammer recovered from the trash had one small blood smear barely visible. But embedded in the handle grip was a partial fingerprint, and it matched Daniel. It wasn't enough to convict. Not yet. But it was enough to arrest him. Just when police thought they had no leads, one piece of evidence blew the case wide open. And what came next was a confession that no one was prepared for. At first, it was hard to believe, unthinkable, even. People struggled to wrap their heads around it, refused to speak it aloud. But the truth was now unavoidable. Daniel Bennett hadn't just murdered his wife. He had been grooming her daughter, Emily, 17 years old. It had started slowly. Compliments, hugs that lingered, jokes only he and she were in on. What seemed like fatherly affection had quietly crossed a line. He began isolating her, positioning himself as her confidant, telling her she couldn't trust her mother, that Marissa didn't understand her, didn't really see her. And Emily believed him. She was young. She thought it was love. In recovered messages, Daniel had called her his future, told her she was mature beyond her years, promised her they'd start fresh once the problem was gone. That problem was her mother. What the community didn't know, what even Marissa never suspected, was that the so-called bond between Daniel and Emily had gone far beyond emotional. Phone data and digital evidence confirmed it. The inappropriate relationship began nearly 10 months before Marissa's death. While Marissa was alive, while she trusted them both, there were photos, private conversations, plans. In one message, Daniel told Emily, "I wish we could just be together already. It'll all make sense soon." And in another, "You'll be free soon. We both will." He had groomed her, manipulated her through affection, secrecy, and control. He blurred lines until she couldn't tell where loyalty ended and danger began. And in doing so, he didn't just betray Marissa. He betrayed both of them. When the truth came out, the town was stunned. This wasn't just a murder. It was a desecration of everything people thought they knew about love, family, and safety. Neighbors were horrified. Teachers who'd once praised Daniel's commitment to Emily's education now saw their own blindness. Church members who'd shared Sunday pews with the Bennetts struggled to even speak his name. One former friend said, "He was like a brother to me. I trusted him around my kids. And now, I can't even look at his picture." Even Emily's own friends were at a loss. Some blamed her. Others mourned her as a victim. Because in many ways, a child groomed and used. Caught between guilt and grief. Manipulated into thinking that love and murder could ever belong in the same breath. The shock wasn't just what Daniel did. It was how long he hid it. How easily he smiled through it. How many people he fooled. And how, in the end, he made sure Marissa would never be able to warn anyone again. By the time Daniel Bennett was brought to trial, the community had already judged him. But inside the courtroom, the law still had to catch up with the horror. It began quietly. Daniel walked in wearing a wrinkled suit, hair neatly trimmed. No visible emotion, no apology. He pled not guilty to all charges: murder, abuse of a minor, and unlawful sexual conduct. The courtroom was packed. Family? Friends? Strangers who simply needed to understand how something like this could happen. The prosecution laid out their case in methodical detail. It showed photos of the crime scene, presented text messages between Daniel and Emily, played voicemails from Marissa to her sister, her voice anxious, pleading. A digital forensic expert walked the jury through Daniel's online activity, highlighting his efforts to erase files, hide folders, mass communication. But it was the witness testimonies that left the courtroom in stunned silence. One neighbor described seeing Daniel at home the morning Marissa was killed, directly contradicting his alibi. Another recalled a comment he once made at a barbecue, calling Emily his future. Everyone had laughed. No one realized he wasn't joking. Then came the moment everyone had waited for. Emily took the stand. She was now 18, thin, pale, her voice barely above a whisper. She hesitated at first, then told the jury everything. She described how Daniel slowly turned her against her mother, how he made her feel special, like she was the only one who really saw him. How at first it felt like a secret they shared, until it became something she didn't know how to escape. She broke down while reading one of his messages aloud. "You belong with me. After this, we'll finally be free." The courtroom held its breath. Some believed she was complicit. Others saw her as a manipulated child. The defense tried to paint her as a liar. They said she had reasons to twist the story, to protect herself, to escape consequences. But the jury didn't flinch. Forensic evidence, digital trails, journal entries from Marissa, and Emily's own haunted testimony, it all pointed in one direction: Daniel's. At sentencing, Marissa's sister stood before the court. Her voice trembled, but her words didn't. "You took our sunshine, you took our peace, and you tried to twist her daughter into your excuse. But you will never take her memory." Daniel showed no reaction, no apology, no tears. The judge called his actions monstrous and cowardly, and handed down the maximum penalty, life in prison without the possibility of parole. Emily was never charged. The district attorney stated she had been a vulnerable minor preyed upon by a man she trusted. Instead, she was placed in long-term therapy and relocated to another state to begin a new life. Even the jury couldn't hide their disbelief at what unfolded. It wasn't just a murder trial. It was the unraveling of a life, a family, and a truth too disturbing to ignore. Daniel Bennett's conviction was swift. The jury had been clear in their decision. He would never see freedom again. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For Marissa's family, it was the only justice they could accept. But for the community, the real question was, how could something so dark have been hidden in plain sight? How had a man so trusted become capable of such horror? Daniel now lives behind bars. His once charming face is now a far-off memory in the eyes of those who once called him a friend. In prison, he faces the consequences of his actions daily, his life a far cry from the one he once had. But for Marissa's loved ones, no amount of punishment could ever erase the betrayal. And what about Emily? The life she once knew is gone. She was never charged with any crime. The court recognized the depth of her manipulation at Daniel's hands. She was, after all, just a teenager, a victim in a much larger, more twisted narrative. Her path ahead would be long and painful. The trauma of losing her mother, of her broken trust, it would take years of therapy, healing, and self-discovery. Emily disappeared from the public eye after the trial. She moved far away, seeking solace in anonymity, far from the eyes that once judged her. But even as she built a new life, she carried the weight of a past she could never escape. The town, too, bore the scars of the Bennett family's dark secret. Neighbors left their homes, families moved away. No one was untouched by the betrayal that had shattered everything they believed about love and trust. For many, it felt like a collective wound that would never fully heal. Marissa's family, however, found a way to carry her memory forward. They started a foundation in her name dedicated to supporting victims of domestic abuse and grooming. Her sister, in particular, became an advocate, speaking at rallies and events, urging others to be aware of the signs of manipulation and emotional control. Though the Bennetts were gone, their story left a legacy of awareness, education, and remembrance. The tragedy of the Bennett family will forever be a reminder. A reminder that appearances can be deceiving and trust is a fragile thing. As you reflect on this heartbreaking case, ask yourself, was this love twisted into obsession, or was it all coldly calculated from the start? If you found this story disturbing and thought-provoking, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Vault for more heartbreaking true crime stories every week. And comment below, was justice served in this case? Do you think Emily should have faced charges, or was she simply another victim? We want to hear your thoughts. For more unsettling and tragic tales, click here to watch our next case about a pastor who hid his deadly secrets. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay aware, and always question the stories we're told.